In this tutorial, we're going to recreate a geometry. This is a what we call a fun box. It's got a Euro gap built in. You can see there's steps involved. We've got two different types of ramps. Um, Basically, this design was done freeform. We didn't really keep track of the steps that were used to build it. So it's a good lesson to see how to just build these generic objects by kind of reverse engineering it, and just we're going to pick out some dimensions and basically recreate this from a clean design. So the only reason we're looking at this object is just for that reason, to get the dimensions and then move on with the clean design. So it might be a good idea to have pencil and paper and keep track of some of the major dimensions that we see. That way, as you're going through and you're doing this, the numbers might be right in front of you. So the way that we measure in SpaceClaim is by choosing the Measure tab, and usually it just defaults with the measure on directly. There's lots of other functions that we can use to help the measurement process, but this is very simple for us to do. We're just going to select various edges and just keep track of the overall length. So in SpaceClaim, notice that whenever you're active in some function, it tries to give you the directions for what you're going to do, and it also tries to highlight the sub commands within those functions as you go. So all it wants us to do right now is click on an object to measure it. So if I click on this surface, it'll give me an area because that's a relevant measurement for a surface. It gives me an area. It will also give me a perimeter in this case because it knows the individual edges. What we're going to want are the edges themselves. So instead of clicking a surface that highlights the entire thing, the entire face, I should say, I'm just going to highlight only the edge. And when I do that, it'll give me the line length. In this case, I know that this box, the main part of the box, is 15 feet by about 15 feet exactly, it looks like in that case. I know that the flat ramp is going out, at least on the floor, it's going to go out about 6 feet. The curved ramp is going to go out also about 6 feet. Okay, I can look at the various widths of these steps. There's really just two steps here, depending on how you count this one. But I can see that that first section is going to be 5 feet. This one looks like it's a little wider. It's at 6 feet. And then the other one is 4 feet. We'll also have to keep track of the depth of these steps as well. Okay, so as I zoom in here and I select that one, I can see that it's just over 4 inches, and I can see that this one is almost 2 feet, and the final one is about 8 inches. So I think that's really most of what we need. Actually, I forgot to measure the Euro, what we call the Euro gap. This has a height of about 1 foot, almost 11 feet and some change, and then it's almost 2 feet wide. So let's start this process just by building the foundation brick. So we're going to go after the 15 foot by 15 foot by, what do we say? Did we measure this earlier? 3 feet high. Okay, so let's start a new design. Now that we have all of our dimensions figured out, and I went ahead and wrote mine down, I'm going to go to File and select New, and I'll just say Design. So to start design, usually you start from the Design tab, and you're going to see us use a number of functions. It's always safest to start in just to stay in select mode when you have geometry available. Sometimes you'll have a certain function on without realizing it, and things could change and you didn't really mean for it to change. You can always, if you mess up your design, always come back to the undo button, which you can get access to by holding Control button and Z. That's the hotkey to undo. So it's always easy just to go for a change if you think you know what you're doing, and then just hit Control Z and get it back to its earlier state. And you can undo quite a few times. So that's just a really good practice to do that. We're starting out in sketch mode, which is exactly where we want to be, because we're just going to draw a square first. So with sketch mode active, these things are unhighlighted now, so I'm able to select the rectangle function. When I press that, SpaceClaim is telling me up here to snap to grid, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm not pressing any mouse buttons yet. I'm just moving my mouse, and I'm going to bring it over here to the origin, and I can see a dot shows up. SpaceClaim is recognizing that that might be a good location for me to drop this first point. So I'm going to drop the first point by selecting the left mouse button and just pressing it once. And now I'm free to draw this square however I want. So notice that the text box is moving. So I've got two text boxes that I'm looking at. One is highlighted in blue, the other is not highlighted. Well, the one that's in blue is actually the one that's taking entries right now. So instead of dragging this out to 15 feet, which is a long way with my given view, I can just type 1.5 and actually put feet units in and then say enter, and it's going to do it automatically for me, which really saves a lot of time. Notice with that done, the other text box for the other dimension in the X direction is now highlighted as if it's waiting for me to type that number in as well, which is exactly what I do. So I'll say 15 feet there, and I'll say enter, and now I can still make changes if I want because the text boxes are open. But in this case, I'm happy with what I see, so I'm going to hit the escape key, which should be on the top left of your keyboard. I'll hit that button 2 times. And when I hit it 2 times, it goes back into select mode. And I like being in select mode when I'm between different operations because now I can't do any damage because all that I can do in select mode is actually select some components here. So that's just a nice practice. So that's the base of our fun box, and we have to give it a height now. So to give it a height, we're going to go into the pull function, and there's different ways to get into the 3D mode. Obviously, I can come down here and hit the 3D mode button, or if I go to pull directly, it forces me to 3D mode because whenever I pull a surface, it knows that it's going into a 3D geometry. Okay, so as I'm on the pull function, it's telling me to select and drag a face to offset it. So right now, that instruction is being highlighted right here with all these different options that I have. The highlighted one is the one that goes with the dialog here. So let's just follow the instructions. We left click and it knows the face that we want. There aren't any other ones to choose from here. And what happens when I left click, you'll see 2 things. One thing that you'll see is that right in the center of the face, there's an arrow pointing to the direction that it thinks it wants me to pull. The other thing you'll notice is that my cursor here has these arrows that are going up and down. It's indicating that the direction has been defined for the thing that I selected, and now if I hold the left mouse button down, I can pull that surface either way. So I can go up or down, and notice that the direction is still the same. I'm just going either in a positive direction or a negative direction. So let's just go in a positive direction, and I'll go up to 3 feet, and I don't have to get it exactly. You'll notice that that might take you a long time to get 3 feet exactly, and it's very sensitive. So instead, I'll let go, and now it's highlighted blue, and I can just type 3 feet directly and say enter like I did in the 2D mode. And now, without making any other changes, I'll just hit escape twice again, and that's exactly what I was looking for, just a brick that's 15 feet by 15 by 3 feet high. Okay, now going off of the dimensions that I wrote down from the other design, I'm not going to flip back to the other design because we already looked at it. What I want to do is divide this face up into multiple surfaces. That makes it easy for me to choose edges and surfaces that are within the larger footprint to be able to make those changes. So the first thing I want to do is let's if we remember the ramp section, we measured that ramp to be 6 feet on the floor. So what I want to do is split this top surface so that I have 2 surfaces. So instead of being 15 feet, I'll have one section that's 6 feet and the other section is going to be 9 feet. So let's use the split command right here. And not split body, but split is going to ask me to choose a face to split. Well, I've got multiple faces to select from now. So as I hover, SpaceClaim is listening, and when they turn yellow, it assumes that that's the one that I want. And when it looks like it's correct, then I'll hit the left mouse button. So notice it moved to a different function here. And now it's telling me to click a point on an edge to split from. Well, let's say that the ramp low point is going to be right here, and the high point would be somewhere up here. I'm going to move this cursor over here to this point, And I'm not pressing any left or right buttons right now. I'm just waiting for it to highlight that point. It also found the direction going along the z-axis. Okay, so now Space Claim knows that I'm going to want to split that surface from this point along that direction, and I can slide that line out away from that point, and you'll see it change. So instead of giving it a percentage of the line length uh, or doing it interactively, I'll actually tab over to where my dimensions are, and I'll just type 6 feet in directly and say enter, and then I'll hit escape twice. Okay, so this is going to be my ramp section, and this will be my flat section where the steps are going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and put that ramp in. We're going to do this with the move function. Um, Up here, you'll notice that in Space Claim, almost I don't know, as far as designing a ramp, a skate park, there's probably well over 50% of the functions that we're going to use, probably closer to 90% are going to be with pull and move, and you'll certainly see us use some other ones as well. So let's start by pulling an edge. So I'm going to activate pull mode, and it's asking me to drag a face to offset it or drag an edge to round it. I'm sorry, I'm actually going to use the move function instead of pull. So go to move, and we're going to move an edge. So I'm going to wait until that only the edge highlights, and when I left click, I'm choosing the object. Space Claim senses that it was an edge, and it brings up this thing called an anchor. So the anchor is something that we're able to move around. So if I were to move and select this blue ball now, I'm able to drag that onto different areas of a geometry that I want to move. We're not going to do anything with this right now because it's exactly where we want it. The next thing that we want to do is just choose the direction to move it in. So I'm just going to hit the blue vector there, and now I can use my left mouse button and hold it down. And unlike it has a similar feel to the pull function, but what I'm doing is actually just manipulating that edge, and that geometry is moving along with it. So another shortcut here is I know that I want to pull this all the way to the floor. I can either type 3 feet in directly right now, or I could stop and then come up here and say move it up to. So what I'm going to say when I select this, it's asking me for a reference to translate along. So I'm going to say move up to the floor, and the floor could be defined just by grabbing one of the edges of the floor, or this edge. It really won't make a difference. I could even manipulate this and choose the actual surface itself. And when I do that, notice it forced that edge to move exactly 3 feet because it knew where the floor was. So which is perfect. That's exactly where I want to be. I'll hit escape twice, and now I've got my 6-foot ramp section. It's always a good habit to go back into measure and verify that this better come out to be 9 feet because that was 15 feet. And if you subtract 9 from 15, we know the length of that ramp is 6 feet, which is exactly what we wanted. So we're off to a pretty good start. Now we're going to put those steps in. So let's do that again by dividing this surface in multiples. So let's go back to design, and we're going to choose the split function again. So with that, actually, I'm just going to escape, go back to the split function, and now it's asking me to click on a face to be split like it did before. So I'll click on that face, and let's start from this point. So let's assume that the sloped ramp section is coming off of this end, if you can remember back to that original design. And the measurements that we got from earlier were the top platform was 5 feet. So I'm just going to split along this line. I'll type 5 feet in directly. Now we'll go ahead and split the next surface, and that one was 6 feet. So I'll split from that new point, and I'll go out to 6 feet and type that in directly. And now these are the 3 different levels that we're going to have. So if you remember from the earlier dimensions, this step in the middle was only about 4 inches down. We're going to move it a little bit lower this time. We're going to bring it down to about 5 inches. So let me select this Actually, I'm going to select both of these faces. You can do multiple, you can select multiple faces by holding control. So let's select this face, hold the control button, which should be CTRL on the somewhere in the bottom left of your keyboard. So after you've selected one, Space Claim will tell me we have one face. Now hold control, and while you're holding control, select the other face. And now it's telling me that it sees two faces, and they're both highlighted orange, which is great. We want to pull both of these faces down. And when we go to the pull function, since they're both selected, we can drop both of these down. Let's go 5 inches this time. And instead of typing in FT for feet, we type in IN for inches. Now both of them have moved 5 inches. And in this case, it actually combined those surfaces. So we're going to have to resplit. So let me go back and split, and sometimes that happens. And we'll talk about that in another session. So we're going to resplit this geometry because we want to treat them as separate steps. And maybe I should have thought about that the first time. But it's easy enough to go back up and redefine. Okay, and there we are. We're back to what we wanted. But the benefit of moving them both is that now I know that this second step was 2 feet above above the platform base. So now I only have to move this 2 feet. So we'll slide that down, and we'll go to 2 feet. And we're left with about an 8-inch base. And of course, my numbers are changing a little bit because we're not following the exact dimensions, but we're close. Now we're going to put the Euro gap in. The easiest way to put the Euro gap in is to go back into sketch mode. I know that I had a step that was 1 foot deep by about 2 feet wide. So if I can just define that perimeter, it gives me a place to carve that out. So let's just go to sketch mode. So I'm just in select where everything is safe. As soon as I hit sketch mode, then notice that actually let me show this instead. When we go to sketch mode, the first thing that you'll see is Space Claim is trying to determine what plane we want to sketch on. So we can only sketch in a two-dimensional plane, and in this case there's lots of two-dimensional planes to choose from. Okay, so we have to make it clear where we want to go. So we know that we want to etch out that step in this plane. So I'm going to hit the left button now, and when that happens, you'll see these buttons appear, and I'm in that sketch mode. And you can see the other half of the geometry just simply doesn't show up when you're in that sketch mode. It hasn't been deleted. It's just being hidden to make it easier for us to sketch. So I'm going to align my view by going down here to the anchor, or I think that's the compass actually. And when I do that, I'm in this view mode, and it just makes it easier to drop the points. So let's just go ahead and make another rectangle, and I'll choose the very top of the ramp. I'll go down. Let's see. I'll go down 1 foot. Type it in, and I'll tab over. And now that that's highlighted blue, I can type in 2 feet and hit enter, and that looks right. So I'll hit escape twice, and then I can go back into 3D mode. And all I did was create one surface, but it divided them into two because Space Claim assumed that that's what I wanted to do, and that's fine. I don't need this section. If I highlight that section, I can either right click and delete, or I could also just hit the delete button on your keyboard. So now you can see if I can pull this in the other direction, Space Claim is going to actually subtract that material. So I go into pull mode, the direction is already highlighted for me, so that's good. And now what I'm going to say is pull up to this face. So let's choose this up to function, and I'm just going to select that face, and it brings it right in line with where I wanted it to be. If I hit escape twice, I can see that's exactly what I was hoping to get. So this all looks good. The last thing we need to do is add our sloped ramp portion. So let's do this by splitting this face now, and we'll just go in a split. This is a function we've done quite a few times already, and I like that location, so we just drop it right there. And now we'll go to pull, and I'll grab this and pull that out to 6 feet. And as you might guess, we're going to actually sketch on this now to get that profile. So we're going to make a sloped ramp in 2D sketch mode. So let me align this. I can select this now before I go to sketch mode, and then it knows exactly where it wants me to be. And remember, if you don't like the plane that it chose, in this case we do like the plane, but just a reminder, you can always come back and say select new sketch plane. And when you do that, Space Claim is trying to sense the different planes that you might want to sketch on. So just remember that you can always get back to this. Okay, in this case we like where it was, so we orient it. And now this time, instead of drawing, instead of using the rectangle function, we're going to use, there's a number of ways to do this, but we're going to use something called a spline. And we'll learn more about splines later. But I'm just going to select the spline mode, and the steps of operation are very similar to rectangle in that I'm dropping points at locations along a grid. So the first point is just going to be right here at the top. So I'm going to left click once, and now right now it's just a straight line. I'll get close to the center. I'm not going to worry too much about where it is, and I'll left click again, and it's basically trying to fit a mathematical function. It's not just connect the dots in this case, but I'm going to go to the third point, which is right at the bottom, and I'm going to click one last time. And as long as I don't click again, I can hit escape, and that's the only points I need to define that. I'm going to hit escape one more time to go back into select mode. And now it looks like a straight line, but since it's the spline, I can select this object, and you'll see a number of things come up. And the only thing we're going to look at right now are these different control points. So right now the line itself is selected, the spline. I want to go up to one of these knots. We call these control points or knots. And notice that I can move this around, and that spline is going to change as a function or as a result of me moving this. And I'm not exactly sure. We don't have an equation defining this. This was just free form. So we're not going to worry too much about how perfect it was to the original right now. We know that if we move that knot, we can get that a kind of convex slope on the top part. And now I can grab this point, this control point, and now I can sort of give it a kind of a concave section down here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just looking for the general idea. In this case, we can always come back and tidy this up with a mathematical function if needed. And that's it. I hit escape again to put us back in select mode. And now if I go to 3D, you can see it divided up these faces just like it has before. So this makes it really easy to remove a surface now, because now I can select this one, which is what I want to remove. And once that's selected, I can just hold my left button down and just drag that material away. So you'll see that was a pretty straightforward process. There were probably lots of different ways to do the exact same thing, but it's not very difficult to go and reverse engineer something just by picking a few dimensions off and rebuilding it from scratch. So that's the end of this tutorial.